Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Joining us tonight, the Independent's chief football writer Miguel Delaney and the sports editor of the Scottish Sun, Roger Hannah. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Let's quickly run through some of the back pages. This in the Sun, which has 1,500-metre drama shocker. So we've got a lot of the papers coming into us all the time. In fact, let's just discuss the Mirror back page at this point. We've got Telegraph covering a story regarding Lee Carsley, which we'll get to in just a second. OK, what we're going to do is we're going to start by discussing Josh Kerr in the Mirror. Josh wins his grudge match but has to settle for silver. A very dramatic finale to this one, Miguel. A lot of narratives ahead of the time talking about Ingebrigtsen against Kerr, but the American Cole Hocker out of nowhere. Does that suggest that sometimes we just can't write the scripts? That's what top-level sport's all about?
I mean, it's one of the things that, I'll be honest, I've been most thinking about since the result, which is I can't really remember a story like this where there's been so much obviously built up towards one specific rivalry, only for the rivalry itself to be undercut by someone else. And actually, even with the way the race went, with the two blocking each other off to open the way for Hocker, it actually played out into the outcome as well. But it's a really remarkable story. And even with Kerr as well, you'd wonder how he's here. I mean, obviously, he's medalled. He's declared his delight after the race. But equally, on one side, he's beaten his great rival. On the other side, there was a potential for more, and this was, given everything we're talking about, completely unexpected.
It was, Roger. I suppose it's a sort of sad story for Scotland as well, wasn't it? Josh Kerr, Edinburgh-based, but he seemed to be pretty phlegmatic about the nature of it and felt that there was nothing to regret, that Hocker just timed his race better.
Yeah, and if you had told Josh Kerr this morning, Terry, that he was going to surge past Ingebrigtsen on the final straight in the stadium tonight, he would have gladly taken that. I don't think any of us really factored in Cole Hocker coming to not only get past Kerr, but, win that gold medal. You speak about his influence in Scotland. There was a watch along at his home stadium in Meadowbank with some of the biggest figures in Scottish athletics history. Tonight, they were all cheering him on. And listen, he's right. He's got an Olympic silver medal. He will look back on it in years to come with the greatest of pride. But it was a shocker from Hocker.
It was a shocker, but I suppose this is what it's all about, Miguel, isn't it? It's about peaking at the right time. And it was interesting, Hocker on that inside lane. He went once, got buffeted back, and then just timed it to perfection.
And it was funny. I mean, it's not just the timing of the night either. The timing of, I suppose, the recent trajectory of his career. There were kind of some, I suppose, students of the game who were saying in the build-up that he had began to come to form in the last 3 months. We'll talk about the timing as regards that. I mean, okay, it's not quite completely out of nowhere, but it's not far off.
Yeah, I think the back page of the Mail has Kerr agony. GB star delivers the race of my life, pipped for gold medal. What do you make of his prospective chances of coming back again in Los Angeles, Roger? At 26 years of age, is it feasible? Still a relatively young man, but it's a brutal sport, isn't it? 1,500.
Yeah, it definitely is, but he is a young man. He's 26. I think this rivalry with Ingebrigtsen, which will probably now be a rivalry that involves Cole Hocker going forward, I think this has got a lot of big international events still to come, Terry. He has based himself over in the States for the majority of his recent career. Josh Kerr, he will believe that he can come back and fulfil his lifetime ambition.
OK, gents, let's switch attention to diving for a moment. And no medal for Andrea Spendolini, Syriacs, but some very profound and poignant and possibly triggering quotes coming out that we want to warn people about as well. The 19-year-old Londoner, of course, daughter of the television personality Fred Syriacs, saying that she didn't want to be alive even 3 years ago. GB diver in the Mail, I didn't want to live 3 years ago. Miguel, I suppose there's a real sombre tone to that radical candour that she's employed there. But I suppose an underscoring of perhaps how sport and activity can lift people mentally.
It's been a little bit of a theme to these games, I suppose, mainly accentuated by Biles and the greater story there, or the bigger story there from America. But I think that's also opened the space for other athletes to speak about. And what it does again, as well, is raise this kind of focus, as you put it, Teddy. What these athletes have to face, I suppose, it's not just the elite, most exacting end of the sport that they're in, and essentially, I suppose, the feats that are the ultimate achievement in those sport. There's also, I suppose, there's the long solitary hours. There's the pressure they're going to put on themselves, and it is a lot to bear. And it's obviously a lot healthier. But let's I suppose, not be under any illusions about it. It isn't too long ago that the attitude for a lot of athletes would have been, I suppose, that to knuckle down, that it was a supposed, if misplaced, or a very misplaced really, a sign of kind of resolve if athletes were able to put this to the side in a manner that probably wasn't it wasn't at all. It wasn't beneficial to their long-term mental well-being. So it's much healthier that they're now in a climate where they can talk about this. And from that perspective, as somber as the quotes were, they were also positive in a way as well, because, for one, they showed she was able to speak about this, and she very much radiated the message of coming out the other side.
Indeed, it's one of the main stories on the back page of The Guardian as well, Roger. The quote here, I've got breath, I've got food on the table, I've got water in my cup, and I've got a roof over my head. So sometimes the Olympic medal isn't everything. There is a message there, isn't there, Roger? Because in recent years, we've seen about the pressure and intensity of some of these training camps, that perhaps there's a sense of perspective coming from a 19-year-old. It's pretty profound.
Yeah, and inevitably, when we go to an Olympic Games, Terry, we focus in our line of work, we focus on sporting success. So many of the headlines at these Olympics, they will be devoted to Novak Djokovic or Scotty Scheffler, or tonight to Cole Hawker or other gold medal winners. Some of the most important stories at these games they're about personal triumphs over adversity rather than sporting triumphs to win a gold, a silver or a bronze medal. Andrea, she's a 19-year-old girl. She has won a bronze medal already in the synchronised event earlier in the week. And her words tonight, I'm happy to be alive, I'm breathing, I've got the support of my family to support me. It's such courage from this young girl to come out. And I think Andrea's words will inspire more young people, more people of all ages tonight than the achievements of many of the gold medal winners.
Absolutely, yeah. It was some very deep comments there, and hopefully wasn't triggering you two at home, but some profound insight from Andrea Spendolini, Serie X. Let's talk, before we move on to football, Miguel, quickly about Dina Asher-Smith on several of the papers, just missing a medal in that 200 metres. Time-wise, a medal looked within her capacity at 24 years of age. Can she come back from this disappointment?
Yeah, you'd think so. Probably just about within the age bracket as regard. Well, in terms of coming back, I'm talking about 4 years' time, just as we were with Kerr. And it's interesting, I suppose, in the context of what we've just been talking about, in terms of kind of the way we view these athletes, in terms of the kind of very binary success or defeat. As she put it herself after the race, she went for it. She gave all she could. She was proud of that. And also, if you consider who actually won the gold in that, it's quite a story there, given just what an accomplished individual Thomas is. And I suppose from that perspective as well, it's something that's often overlooked in this, that it's not just about those three possessions at the end, but given how close they are to the extreme elite of their fields, which is, performance in itself. But obviously, as you say, Asher-Smith would have wanted much more. So to lose out by so little, she can still be she's proud of I suppose how she did, and also how she raced, given the kind of, I suppose, the adventure of the approach.
Absolutely. Telegraph saying that Asher-Smith denied medal by 0.02 seconds, and Daryl Neater of Great Britain just behind her as well. So tight, you need modern technology to define these things. Mentioned for Sky Brown as well, a skateboarding bronze. Welcome back. You are watching Back Pages tonight. It's welcome back to my guest, the Independent's chief football writer, Miguel Delaney, and the sports editor of the Scottish Sun, Roger Hannah. Roger, we hope to come to you and your paper a little bit later to talk Rangers. But first of all, let's talk Julian Alvarez. Makes a lot of the back pages, including the Sun. Hall or jewel chest for Pep, writes Martin Blackburn. What do you make of of this potential deal? £82 million with add-ons, Roger Hannah, for a player that's been there for 2 seasons, scored 20 Premier League goals for the English champions?
And he's been a very successful signing, a very successful player. On one hand, I'm quite surprised the City are letting him go, but I think the question on everyone's lips will be, how is Pep Guardiola going to spend this money? You cannot see him going into another huge season, potentially his last season at City, with only Erling Haaland. Alvarez not only came into the team to give Haaland a break or cover when he was injured, he would play behind Haaland, to the side of Haaland. And I know Savio has arrived at the Etihad over the summer, but you would think Guardiola will be eyeing targets to bring in before the big kickoff.
Great business, isn't it, Miguel, for a player signed for £14 million, but the Times put City cash in on £81.5 million Alvarez. It's great, the money, isn't it? But is there a problem at Manchester City with players who can't play that perhaps Pep's going to have to address every season or so?
Well, I suppose this comes from maybe a very specific situation with City, especially since, to be honest, it's been touched on there. Well, I would have seen Alvarez as almost the ideal Guardiola type of forward, because he's got that sort of range to his game. He's fluid. He can play across the front line. And he was often a perfect deputy for Erling Haaland. But of course, Haaland is the issue there, because he has been really, I suppose, other than the manager, and maybe what Kevin De Bruyne evolved into, but City's first global megastar of this entire era. And given the way they pursued him, given the way it represents, and even given the way Guardiola has set up his team since Haaland came in, or really when he changed it halfway through Haaland's first season, everything works back from the Norwegian. And obviously he wants to play so much, he scores so much, that it's just, unfortunately for Alvarez, even though I think he was one of these really astute signings that City made, there was no obvious place for him. He wants regular football now. City and Guardiola, to be fair, have been they've taken a broader view in this, and one that's good for the player. And maybe the biggest surprise, given that he hasn't played that much, is just the extent of the price. But I suppose that has to be put in the context of, this is the other side of Alvarez. We're talking about one of the most accomplished players in the modern game, given everything he's won. A Copa America and a World Cup with Argentina, treble with Manchester City, so virtually every trophy there. And someone who, of course, has been, when he's played, he's been really effective for City.
Roger, do you think it emboldens the opposition at the moment, Arsenal and alike, who are chasing Manchester City?
No, I'm not actually convinced it does, Teddy. City are still the team to beat. I'm pretty sure come the Community Shield and come the first weekend of the Premier League season, it will be Haaland, it will be probably Doku and Savio either side, it will be Kevin De Bruyne, it will be Bernardo Silva, Phil Foden will be in there, Rodri will be in there. So they remain the elite of the elite in the Premier League. They are going for 5 in a row now, and I am convinced before this transfer window closed, there will be a replacement for Julian Alvarez to add to that array of talent at Pep's fingertips.
It certainly could kickstart the market, couldn't it? Which we'll talk more about with Miguel in just a second. But Miguel, I want to come to you on your story regarding Scott McTominay. Roger will have a say from a Scottish perspective as well on that. But Manchester United stand firm, Miguel, you're right, with Scott McTominay price after multiple Fulham bids. So what do you think the player wants to happen here at 27?
Well, I suppose this is maybe the slight sadness to this, and that if McTominay had his choice, it would be really to stay at Manchester United. He's a supporter of the club. He's grown up there. And also, this where there's a little bit of poignancy to it. He's been quite a loyal lieutenant for United and a really effective one. Let's not forget, Ten Hag wanted to get rid of him last summer, only for him to really make pretty decisive interventions for Ten Hag early on. At an early point of the season, he was the team's top scorer. So he has been a really good servant for United. But of course, now they're under this new, it's under a new minority ownership, given the Glazers still there and Ratcliffe has this minority stake. But the Glazers obviously handed over the running of the football side to Ratcliffe, which is involved. I suppose it will gradually bring an overhaul of the squad. It just might be slower than anticipated because United need to make sales to make that happen. And one of the players that has been considered dispensable, if actually you could almost extend that description to half the squad. But McTominay is one. He's one of the more valuable players given his performance in the Premier League. And Fulham, I suppose, at this point, an upwardly mobile mid-table club. They obviously admire him. They've put in 3 bids, though. And because United want to raise money because they are that bit closer to PSR limits, given the two major signings they've already made, they do want to raise sale price. So what I've been told today and what I reported is United are holding out for a package that's worth 30 million altogether, probably a basic fee of 25, and with add-ons that will bring it to 30 all in. And Fulham so far haven't got to that, but negotiations are continuing.
Okay, well, all parties involved have different motivations, Roger. What would be the best for the player, even if he loves Manchester United? And I wonder what Scotland manager Steve Clarke would hope for. Would he want him to be a regular starter, perhaps at Fulham? That's more likely.
Yeah, we want him to be a regular starter wherever he was, Terry. For me, there's echoes here of Conor Gallagher and Chelsea to Atletico Madrid. The player himself, a lifelong supporter. He's only ever been a player at the club. He doesn't want to go. The manager has spoken warmly of him, but in the times we live with PSR rules, this is a homegrown player. It would be pure profit for Manchester United if he was sold to Fulham or elsewhere. I think United will miss him when he goes. 250 games for the club. I think he scored 10 goals for United, some very important goals last season. I think back to a double against Chelsea. He won the FA Cup with Ten Hag against City in May. He won a League Cup with Ten Hag the previous season. He has been a very useful player. Coming 28 years of age, I think, before Christmas, he's coming into his prime, Scott McTominay. And whether he's at United, whether he's at Fulham, I think he'll go on to be a really important player for someone this season.
Absolutely can't believe he's nearly 28, Miguel. It makes you feel old, doesn't it? But talking of age, it's kind of a central thread in a piece you've written in The Independent. Football might be on the verge of a new transfer market era, one where the richest doesn't take all. Tell us about this situation.
Well, actually, and the United situation is one of them, actually, because one of the reasons that United have taken this decision to sell players like McTominay is because they want to completely overhaul their policy to essentially buy young, and well, not necessarily buy low, given they can be high transfer fees, but younger players who can play a more intense pressing style that defines the game now means lower wages. And this, as actually Ratcliffe has directly spoken about in interviews, when he took over, is mimicking the City approach. It's mimicking the Madrid approach, and what this has done is basically all of the wealthiest clubs now, they're essentially taking that model that was typified by clubs like Dortmund, Sevilla, Lyon, even in England like Southampton, West Brom, Brighton. And I suppose it's no coincidence that Dan Ashworth, who was responsible for policy at two of those clubs, is now at United. They're essentially going for that profile of player. I think it's going to be very interesting for what it does for the game in the long term. It's going to be a younger, more energetic game. We already saw it at Euro 2024, where a lot of the most influential players were 21 or so, like Musiala, Bellingham, whereas previously in like 2000, 2008 would have been Xavi 28, Zidane 28, and we're beginning to see the same in club football. But what's interesting, I suppose, in terms of kind of the direction of the market as well, is it suddenly means players who get into their late 20s, where most of them would have been expecting high wages, because that's where you earn your most in your career traditionally, that may only be reserved for, I suppose, the best performing players or that elite bracket of players. And it could do some very strange things to the market. And we already saw it in this year's Champions League final, where Dortmund, who had previously, I suppose, been typified by young signings like Haaland and Bellingham, well, suddenly they had this squad made up of players in their late 20s. That are kind of a cannier group, but maybe a little bit more of a mismatch. And it's going to maybe do some odd things to the game in that sense, as all the biggest clubs, wealthiest clubs, suddenly have these lean, intense pressing machines that have maybe a lower age profile.
Yeah, Roger, what do you make of the trend as well? Because I suppose it's set against sports science and longevity. We're seeing Luka Modric playing for Real Madrid at 38, Cristiano Ronaldo still going, Zlatan Ibrahimovic played into his 40s. Do you think there will be a pivot where suddenly the smaller, say, clubs have some of the older, really skilled players? Because we don't want to miss out on that experience, do we? Just have rapid youngsters.
Well, what did another famous Scotsman say? You don't win anything with kids, Teddy.
Yes,
I still think there's room in every team for a balance. Yes, Manchester United will pursue that model, and so many others are trying to do it. As Miguel said, City did it, Madrid have done it, many others as well before them. But for me, the really successful teams have a balance. Barcelona will be great next season with Lamine Yamal at 17, but they will need a few in there, to balance Yamal and Pau Kabasi at the back. You know, for every one of them, they'll need a Lewandowski, they'll need a Gundogan, they will need experience, and you can say that for every team. Yes, United will pursue youngsters, but I still think they will need the likes of, you know, Bruno Fernandes and others round about them just to give them the experience that they will require to be successful.
Absolutely. The brain sometimes takes longer than the body, doesn't it, to get ready for elite sport. Let's talk about Lee Carsley, Republic of Ireland international, England under 21 coach. And in the Telegraph, Mike McGrath writes, Miguel, that he's likely to take interim England job for the games against the Republic of Ireland and Finland. Do you agree with that? And if he does well, what chance Carsley becoming permanent manager? It's
a good story by Mike. And also, I suppose, I think it's an interesting one for the FA because it just gives him breathing space. In the days immediately after Southgate's announcement, Eddie Howe seemed a very clear favourite. Newcastle, we know, immediately dug in. And this, I think, just also alleviates pressure on the FA when there doesn't really need to be pressure. Because for the next few months, it's only the Nations League. Qualifying doesn't start qualifying for the World Cup doesn't start until March, which is quite late, given that it's only a year and a few months after that. But, I mean, I suppose it allows the FA to go down two potential paths, as you referenced there, Teddy. One is a story I wrote shortly after Southgate's departure was they can at least investigate whether someone like Guardiola, who is a target, would want to take over if he leaves Man City. So Carsley allows that. And then, of course, there's the old Gareth Southgate route, which is someone Carsley himself takes the job, begins to impress in it, and maybe actually is promoted. He's really highly rated in football.
Miguel, I have to jump in. We'll see what happens to the England manager job. We've run out of time. Roger, I have to apologise. We didn't get time for the Scottish Sun headline. Spark and pride. Gaffer hails Gers battlers as they Resco Euro bid. More details of Rangers to come ahead of that second leg against Dynamo Kiev.